Okay, hello everyone. We just went live, so I'm gonna give it like just a few seconds for people to come in. I know people are getting notified. Oh, I see some people are coming in. Hi. Okay, so I have a very long intro this evening. It is 7 p.m. at night. So I'm gonna just run through it and then we will get to like the good part of the night. So good evening, everyone. My name is Haley. I'm a bookseller for the Novel Neighbor here in St. Louis, and I'm like really, really excited to hang out with you guys for like the next hour or so. If you don't know who the Novel Neighbor is, we are a women-owned and operated bookstore in St. Louis, Missouri. And before I get into like introducing our author tonight, I really want to thank the St. Louis County Library for partnering with us on this event. I absolutely adore them. I think this event is through their Reading Garden series for young audiences program, which brings young adult authors into St. Louis for young audiences. And it is absolutely like such a treat to be able to get to partner with them. But like I said, we love working with them. I think they are something special, and I think like our community sees that they are something special, considering that they have a new library and a new event space that opened this past summer. So it feels really good seeing that our community agrees that they also love our library system. And I just really, really love to brag about them. So we are in the process of rescheduling an in-person event with Gayle after tonight. So thank you guys for bearing with us as we transitioned over to virtual, and I can't wait to see you guys like in person at the library branch, the Clark family branch, which is fantastic. So if you haven't gone, please go. It is so cool. I absolutely love them. So we have a fun event tonight. I know you were expecting to come in person, but I hope that you are still able to like come virtually as you are now coming in, I see. So I have a brief little plan for the evening. So our author will come here in a moment to celebrate the release of Afterlife, and then we'll have like a little conversation because I have some fun questions to ask. Let me have fun, and then we'll turn it towards a more interactive Q&A. So feel free to start asking questions in the comments of whatever platform you're asking or watching this on now. So that way they kind of start building up. And keep those questions coming when we want this to be as interactive and fun for you guys as possible to kind of make up for not being with you guys in person. And like, let's be real, the past 2 days I have not seen anyone or talked to anyone, and I think we need this interaction of being able to speak to people after being snowed in for the weekend. So point of that is start asking some questions, keep those puppies coming because we will get to them. We do have a fun little giveaway tonight as well. So for the first 5 people who purchase a copy of Afterlife from the Novel Neighbor, you will get a fun like little swag bag put together by Gayle herself. And it's like a fun little treat from our benevolent ruler. So if you purchase that, the first 5 people who get that will be sent like a little swag bag with their purchase. So it's a fun little treat for you guys as well. So enough from me. Let me introduce Gayle tonight. So Gayle is award-winning author and journalist. She's written several best-selling novels for children and adults, including Not Nothing, the Just One series, and the #1 New York Times bestseller, If I Stay, which has been translated into more than 40 languages, and in 2014 was adapted into a major motion picture. She lives in Brooklyn, New York with her family. So tonight, we also have a fun little treat for you since this is virtual. Gayle will also be joined in conversation, kind of like a little panel style, tonight with her legendary agent, Susie Townsend, who is the vice president of New Leaf Literary. And she is truly such a tour de force of a literary agent that when her publicist asked us if she could join, I truly like screamed a little bit. And then I replied to my email. I was like, yes, send her over. The more the merrier. So we were very excited. So we have a little treat. But that is truly, I could just talk all night for like the next hour or so, and I truly get to do that with you guys. So without further ado, here is Gayle and Susie. Oh my gosh, hello.
Your introduction made me so happy. I love that you screamed when you got offered Susie. Also, you gave me such like library envy. Oh my God.
So much. You guys, our library system is, I could talk about them for the next hour.
It's like I have FOMO of the library I was supposed to be at.
Listen, we're gonna reschedule. You're gonna come back. Susie, you can come on over too. It'll just be like a little girly pop hangout session. It's gonna be a great time.
I
All
mean,
right.
after that introduction, I have to come because
Yeah.
nobody has ever introduced me with such fervor before.
Oh my gosh, listen,
Not in front of
Jenny
you, Susie, but your name often elicits that kind of reaction from people.
Jenny
No.
was in our
Haley was
email.
just brave enough to do it to your face.
Listen, I just like I have so much fun doing these things, and like first of all, Gayle, we're so excited to like have you virtually here whenever
Hi,
we
virtual
saw you
people.
were coming. We were all so excited. If I Stay was truly formative for my youth. So whenever I saw your name on our spreadsheet, I was like, oh, say less, get me in there. And then we got our email today from Jenny saying that Susie wanted to come along, and I said, oh, sign her up. So it's a fun little night for us tonight. So me and Susie are gonna like volley some questions back and forth to Gayle. But before we get into like the questions, you're here for Afterlife. Gayle, can you tell us a little bit about your newest book?
This is like the first time I've had to do this. All right, Afterlife is about a 17-year-old girl named Amber who is like as every girl as I could have written. And it takes place, it opens on a spring day, and she's riding her bike home from school. And she's sort of thinking about prom and thinking about her boyfriend and like wondering if her sister's going to be home. So if she's not, she could sneak the boyfriend in, like just total regular day as far as she's concerned. She gets home, things are a little weird. The garage door is locked, the other door is locked, but she gets herself in. Something feels off in the house. It's really cold. She can't get warm. She can't find any of the shows she likes on TV. She can't even figure out the TV. She can't remember her boyfriend's phone number. And just as her mom pulls up in the driveway, she sort of sees her high school graduation portrait, which she hadn't seen yet. And she goes out into the garage. Her mom gets out of the car and screams. And that's because Amber died 7 years ago riding her bike home from school. And Amber has returned, and she has no idea why, and neither does her family. And it's a book about sort of Amber, but also this ripple effect. So it goes back and forth between Amber chapters and people in her community. It has her mom and her dad and her neighbor and her sister and her best friend, her boyfriend, but also people like her English teacher and like this photographer who seem to have really no connection to her. And you kind of see how interwoven they all are by the end.
Oh, that truly just sounds so heartbreaking. Like,
Yes.
I feel like every time I read one of your books, I'm just like, oh, she sells it as like the ultimate sad girl novel. And I like do think that you are one of the OG starters of like a sad girl novel in the sense that you like talk about grief and talk about all of these sad topics. What draws you into like talking about these topics and like exploring these topics?
See, it's so funny because like I never think of them as sad girl novels. Like,
Listen, you have me crying and sobbing.
I think of them as sad reader novels or cathartic reader novels, but I always think of my characters like Mia and like Amber as these girls who have like these amazing lives and these amazing experiences, right? And then a terrible thing happens and they're grappling with the line between life and death, but they're like these fully realized, joyful people who are in love, who have all these relationships. So to me, these books are sort of full of energy. The fact that they deal with people who sort of are dead or in between, I think, I've come to realize I clearly have a fascination with this, right? I have a fascination, I think, born of my own loss, of how thick that veil is between life and death in our culture because we've made it that way, and how other cultures don't. And people have so much more memory of the dead woven into their daily lives that it makes that death easier to bear. So I think I played with that in If I Stay and Where She Went. And then sort of this book, really, that is like the heart of this book.
Mm-hmm. Susie, how is that like reading them? Like, what drew you to like?
I mean, it's so funny because Gayle and I started working together in 2020, and I don't think I told her this right away, but when I first read If I Stay, when I first got into publishing, the book was just coming out, and I remember someone saying like, "Oh, have you read this yet? It's so good." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And all I knew was like that this, was going to be like, is she going to wake up or not? And but when I started reading afterwards, I mean, I feel like on page 10, I was like, oh God, like sobbing on the subway. And but afterwards, for years, I mean, I still do this, but I would tell writers who wanted to like to get published and were like struggling a little bit, if they were struggling with their characterization, I would be like, have you read If I Stay? Because within the first 10 pages, you're like, I love this family. They're so great. And then you're crying. And so when Gayle and I started working together, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited because I feel like Gayle can write characters that they feel so real. And I think that's why there's such a strong emotional resonance between the readers and the books, because the characters feel so real. They feel so alive. Like you just feel like you know them. And so when it's funny, because one of the things that I wanted to ask Gayle to basically, I know the answer, but I wanted her to tell all of you, is like, obviously Gayle's written a lot of books, and she has even more ideas. There's many ideas that aren't written yet or haven't been fully realized yet. And so Gayle, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the journey of like when you started writing Afterlife, and then ultimately how you decided like this should be the next book.
Yeah. Okay. So I started writing Afterlife in, I would say, a 2-year period that in retrospect, I was grappling with some serious depression and anxiety. And even though I write about mental health a lot, and now I'm on Lexapro, I did not recognize what it was. To me, I just kept starting all these books and I'm like, these are terrible, these are terrible. And I started and finished drafts of several different books and through them thought they were all horrible. And at one point, I remember thinking to myself, I used to know how to do this, but I don't. I have lost my way. And that is where the book of I Have Lost My Way lodged in my brain. And that became the book I wrote. But then the crazy thing that happened is sort of years later, with some perspective, these books started to come out and become, I'm sorry to say, like my favorite books. So it starts with, I think, Frankie and Bug. We Are Inevitable kind of started in that area. Frankie and Bug started in that era. This is my depressions era. Not Nothing started in that era, and Afterlife started in that era. Like all of these books that I thought were terrible have now become like the books I'm the proudest of. And so I think there's something to that process of writing something and stepping away from it that has become like really, really important. But all of which is to say, like, I think a lot of times people look at authors and from the outside, you just think that career is so perfect. That person has like this idealized life. And I definitely hit the lottery with If I Stay, but careers go up and down and up and down, and you can really get in your own head about things. So like part one is to sort of pierce the glamour that people might have of anybody having a perfect life, because nobody does. And part two is that like, I kind of stumbled upon the secret, which is I think I write better books, some of them, most of them, when I can write a horrible draft and put it away and then turn to something else. And so I move things forward that way. And I don't stress out about it as much as I used to, because I'm just like, oh, this just needs time and seasoning and maybe like 7 years of drafts. But like it will get there when it's time to get there. So that's why Susie kindly sort of talks about all the different projects that I have that have not been fully realized, because those are ones where there's drafts of them there, but it's not the right book. And then I have so many other ideas that I just can't keep up with them, or I'm too lazy to keep up with them.
You're the last
industrious writers out there that I think could really do it.
Oh my gosh. That truly just like made me so emo, but like in like a good, happy, hopeful way. In
See, it's not a sad girl novel. That's a Gayle Forman novel right there.
For me. Like on the same like idea of like you working on projects, how is it working with Susie? Like what does it look like from like acquiring a novel, going through like the editing phase and the publishing process? How does that look like together as like author and agent?
Well, in the first part of this process, I'm dead, right, Susie?
we joke, I should clarify to everyone, we joke a little bit. Gayle went through a period where, you know, they had a lot of potential avenues that her career could take, and she was a little overwhelmed. And publishing can be frustrating. Sometimes it moves at a very slow pace. Sometimes you're working so hard and like nothing is managing to hit quite right.
Susie's politely saying that Gayle was thinking my career was over. I'm done. Yeah.
And but so at one point she said to me, just pretend I'm dead. What would you advise the estate of Gayle Forman to do? Like, just tell me what to do. And so
this is what they told me to do. This is what they told me to do.
Let's do Afterlife. And I think for Gayle, I mean, you tell me, but it has seemed like that was a little freeing for you to be like, oh, okay, I'll just focus on writing and I'll focus on, the promotion and things like that. But like, you help give me like a roadmap.
Yeah. It allows me to detach and focus on the thing that I'm focusing on. And then also, to know that Susie and the team at New Leaf, like, they have ideas of what strategically works best, but they want to respect the writer as a creative person. So they never try and impose those ideas, but they know, right? And so that gives them, I feel like that gave her license to be like, what do you think is best? Because creatively, I could get into any one of these. And then it turned out to be wonderful because I landed with Rosemary Brosnan at HarperCollins, who I adore. And it was just a wonderful editing process. And I loved sort of getting back into it. And like, I had this jacket, which is like the most beautiful jacket. Hello, people, I got toenails. I did my nails. Anyhow, it all came together beautifully. And who knows what will happen with this book, right? Because like, you don't. But I get to work with wonderful people and make things I'm proud of.
Yeah. And you say that. And did you see that sticker on the front of that book?
Yeah, I know, but yes, I feel very fortunate. But you never know. So I'm just gonna like embrace the thing that I know it has given to me, and see that throughout my books. And that's also a little bit form of like detaching, right? Because it's now the part of the game, like the weather today, I don't control. And like 5-10 years ago, I would have gotten really upset about today. It was like I was telling you earlier on about whether you're snowed in. And now I'm just like, why expend energy getting upset about something I don't control?
This has become like novel neighbor therapy group. Like Gayle Forman is now our therapist. But on the topic of that cutie little sticker on the front of your book, how was the process of like finding out that you were a book club pick and like the process of like keeping it hidden and like them announcing that it was the YA book club pick?
It was torturous. Because I get this like amazing news like 3 months ago. It was a while ago. And I am told, tell no one, which is like hard enough to do. But then I get my first copy of the book. I get my first finished copy about a month ago. And it has this beautiful spoiler on it. And I'm like, but am I not allowed to show anybody the book jacket? And they're like, right, we'll just show everybody the advanced reading copy. I'm like, but I can't show them this. So it was torture. And it's the most thrilling torture, but still it was torture.
Yeah, we definitely had several celebratory moments. And then we're like, okay, now we just have to wait for it to come out.
Oh, I just think that's like so amazing. I love that. So fun fact, usually like book club stickers aren't like necessarily a sticker on the book. It's like screen printed onto it. Good Morning America is now doing stickers, so you can take them off.
Well, this copy is printed right on the jacket.
No.
Yeah, they were not taking social media content in mind when they did that, because those wonderful like unboxing videos couldn't happen.
Couldn't happen. Oh my gosh.
I had my unboxing video planned for today. But we had to bump it because we had to have all this like snow St. Louis content instead.
Okay, and then I have like one big question left, and then Susie, you can ask whatever questions you want. I just have like a fun one, and then we can switch over to like all of the questions that I see here in the comments. So if you haven't asked a question in the comments, please do. Like, this is so much fun, you guys. I just like love asking questions, and it's so much fun to like read your guys' questions. So if you have any, put them in the comments. I know Like, it's been a while since If I Stay has come out, but in the green room, I was saying how, like, it was formative for me. What was it like having your book turned into a movie? Like, what was that process like?
Can we
Like,
just
it's so
pause and say that If
interesting.
I Stay is 16 now, she is now her own reader.
Stop, that's crazy.
It's wild, right?
Oh my
I
god,
just made you feel old.
she's about to, like, slam her door and say she hates
Yeah,
me.
she's rolling her eyes. Mom, I hate you.
She's like, "This isn't a phase, mom."
Yeah.
That's truly so crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, we're
Okay,
seeing
boomer mom. No, she's yeah.
Oh my god.
Sorry. We just had a little
You're
moment.
so fine, that truly just, like, rocked my world for a second.
It's wild. So let's see. It was surreal. It was like crazy because like I wrote If I Stay, and like people think it was my first book, but it was actually my third published book, and then I'd written 2 books under a pseudonym, like as part for a packager. So like I was not coming out of the gate. And when I sat down to write If I Stay, even though I had had all this experience, like my agent had quit agenting, and my editor had left editing. So I was like starting from scratch. And I started writing this book, and I remember thinking, there is no way this is going to be a book that anybody buys. It felt like it wasn't YA. It was like all over the place. And when I saved it on my hard drive, I saved it under the file name as Why Not? As in, like, I know this is not going to go anywhere, but I feel compelled to do it. So why not? And then, of course, like that was the book that didn't take several years to write. It came out in like this 3 months of just like working in this like vacuum of just creativity and beauty and joy and grieving. And so I had no idea. I had no idea. Like it was just, I had not had any successes in the industry. I did not know. And so when that book started to go out into the world and just people started to respond the way they did, I was just like floored. I did not know what was happening. And then like when it came out and then find out it's going to be a movie, like it's just so crazy. All of it is so crazy. And so when you're finally on set, it feels like, oh, you've been doing this forever and it was this, and you know the movie industry, and you get there and it felt completely surreal all over again. I was just like, these were people who I had lost in the real world and wrote about, and people I made up completely in my head. And like, they're now being personified by these actors and wearing, in one case, wearing the clothes of one of the characters of whom the dad is based. Like, it was so surreal to see like the little bathrooms with the name of your production on. So like that, it was just crazy. It like that part I couldn't believe, just because even though there had been like 7 or 8 years in between like me writing the book and that happening, like it just felt like so the opposite of what I was ever imagining.
That truly sounds so amazing, and I love rewatching that movie just because I feel like it is such a great adaptation as well. Like, it's so hard to do a book to screen adaptation well, and I think this is such a great example of like Hollywood doing it correctly and beautifully and truly like
I'm so glad you think so. I really felt like readers were just like, they didn't change a thing, and we changed a ton. But the fact that you didn't feel it means that you feel like you were in the world of the book, and it felt true. And then, of course, it had the music, which like elevates it so
so
much.
good.
Yeah.
I really, really loved that movie. So I thought that was like a fun little like selfish question that I wanted. And Susie, do you have any
No,
like
I love it.
I want to say for people who are, when you're thinking of your questions, if you have Susie questions, you should take advantage of the fact that she's
please ask Susie questions too. She is really
good.
cool.
Good.
No, I mean, Gayle, you sort of touched on it when you said that, like, If I Stay sort of came out in like 3 months. Obviously, you've written a number of books, and I know the experience of writing every book. Every book can be a different writing experience. So, what were some of your biggest struggles with writing Afterlife? And like, was there anything you had to like learn in order to like finish it?
I think the time thing really helped with this book, because I don't want to like give too much away, but it is structured in a way where there's all of these things that don't seem related, and they have to come together, and there has to be some pretty big twists that you don't see coming. So that structure alone, like I knew that's what I wanted to do with it, but it was like the kind of thing that when you're in the middle of it, I felt like I was sort of wrestling with 24 octopi because it was just like I'd keep one hand down this way. It was just so hard. But being able to come back to that one several times over, I think was really helpful in being able to make those things work, as well as making the stakes for Amber's present tense feel really, really high. So that one just, I think, it was complicated. And to try and write, some people might be able to write a book like that all at once, but I don't think I can.
Yeah. There's a twist that I definitely was like, oh my God, what? I did not see that coming. I think I emailed you about after I read it and realized what had happened. And I was like, oh my God, how did I not know that? So you did a good job.
That's high praise. I'm excited. So.
And what are you most excited for readers to take away once they get to read Afterlife? Because I know you're talking to two people who've already read it, but for everybody else who hasn't gotten there yet.
I want readers to like come away knowing that their lives have impacts on people in ways they can't see, in both ways that are seen and unseen. That all of us are pebble dropping into the pond and we have these ripple effects. And you see that with this one girl, Amber. And I want you to recognize that that is true about every single one of you.
I love that.
That makes me so emo. Okay, so now we are going into the audience Q&A portion of tonight's event. I've been kind of going through them. I've been seeing them, so I'm bookmarking them as I go. But this question says, what is your favorite Taylor Swift album? And is there a Taylor Swift song you'd link with Afterlife, and why?
I mean, that is the best question. And that we're just going to have to do a spoiler because we were going to play it at the end. My era is Folklore, but the Taylor Swift song that is the theme song from this is from Evermore. It is Marjorie. When you finish reading the book, you will understand why Marjorie is the theme song of this book.
I love that song, and I consider myself an Evermore moon. I'm a fearless sun, an Evermore moon, and then a Speak Now rising.
I love Swifties so much.
I love that. Oh my God.
I love Swifties so much.
So whenever you said Evermore, I was like, oh, that is for me specifically.
Okay. I was born in the 80s, and I feel like I'm firmly 1989 was my big era. But.
So good. Have you listened to the vault track songs for 1989? Oh, so good. I love those. They I didn't like them at first because I thought they all sounded the same sonically, and then I listened to them on repeat, and I was like, oh wait, these kind of slap. These are kind of good.
That's how I felt with Midnights. When I first listened, I'm like, this is okay. And then I went back to it and could not stop listening to it.
Every single track is a banger. Yeah. I never skip anything on Midnights. It's so good. Okay. I understand that this is a huge question, but I may ask, at what point did you decide to pursue being an author?
It was kind of one of those things like Susie with agenting. I backed into it. It was both obvious and not. I've been writing my entire career before I became an author, a fiction writer. But I wrote nonfiction. I wrote journalism for magazines, and I thought the idea of being able to write about anything you want with no limits was terrifying. If with the job that I did, I interviewed people. There were facts, there were deadlines, there were word counts, all those things sort of boxed in your story. I thought without that, how could you do anything? And then I wrote a nonfiction book, and then I had my daughter, and I couldn't travel to write stories anymore. I didn't want to. And I was sort of home and completely broke. And I told my agent at the time, the one who eventually left agenting, I'm like, I'm going to have to leave this. Do you have anything that can be done? And she's like, well, there is this ghostwriting job for a young adult novel, but you should just write your own. And I had worked for years at 17 magazine and had all these ideas. And so that was on a Thursday. And by Tuesday, I had the first 20,000 words of what would become my first YA novel. And as I was writing it, I was like, you dummy, obviously this is where you belong. I worked for 17. I wanted to work for 17 because before there was a magazine called Sassy, which people of a certain era or people who are back in their 90s era will remember as like the coolest, most groundbreaking feminist magazine. I was desperate to work there. By the time I got to New York, Sassy was dead. So I went to work for 17. It was amazing. I've always been drawn to that kind of writing. I've always been drawn to writing to young people and for young people and about young people. And so like when I finally realized it was like, oh, this is what you're supposed to be doing. But that was like, a couple books into a second book into my career. I was like writing this. And then I was just like, this is something that I really want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And Susie, you didn't start out agenting, right?
No, I started out as a high school English teacher, and I taught for 6 years, and I used to always tell my students, because I taught a lot of juniors, and they'd be like applying to colleges, and I used to always say like, well, find like, what do you love to do, and like figure out like what job would pay you to do that, and then choose your major based on that career, and that'll help you apply to colleges. And a wonderful student said, "Oh, so you just love like talking to high school kids?" And at the time, I was like, "No, I don't." But I thought about it later, and I was like, oh, "I just love to read, but like nothing would pay me to do that." And then I was like, "Wait a minute, books. How do I get into books?" And here I am.
Can I ask you, because I imagine if there's people watching, a lot of them do love to read and do love books and do want to know, I would love to work in that world. And being an author is amazing, but it's not what everybody wants to do. So what is it about agenting that you love and that drew you to that?
It's funny because in my mind, and I feel like publishing is a very sort of strange little world that we don't talk about very much. And so I just thought, when I decided I wanted to try to get into publishing, I thought I should be an editor. I love books, I love to read, I will be an editor, I will sit at a desk, I'll read and I'll give notes. And when I was trying to find a job, I ended up getting an internship at a literary agency. And at the time I didn't know anything about what an agent did, other than they sell the books, from the author to the publisher. And I thought, well, I'm not a good salesperson, so I couldn't do that. And I wouldn't be a good telemarketing salesperson at all. But I'm a book person. I love books, and I have been selling books to my friends since I was a child, because I was like, I love this book, you have to read it so we could talk about it. And that's kind of what I love about agenting, is that I work with authors like Gayle, and I get to see the books first, and then I get to go to editors and basically tell them about how much I love it and convince them to read it and hopefully convince them to buy it. And that's sort of the beginning of what an agent does. And I would say that, the longer I've been doing this, the more that then I've also gotten to see that there's a lot of sort of strategy and planning and things where you can talk to authors about what their ultimate goals are, and what they really want readers to come away with, and what are their big dreams, and how do we basically look at not just one book, but a career, a lifetime of books, and how are we going to piece things together. And I like that sort of analytical sort of puzzle aspect to it too.
God, you should go back and thank that snarky high schooler, right? Yeah. And I should too.
That is so big brain too. You could also take the path of being a bookseller, which is more community based, and that same idea of giving your books to friends and selling your friends these books.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, is if you love books, there's so many different ways that you can make it your job. Yeah.
It's so crazy. And whenever I go home for the holidays and my parents are like, do you still work at that bookstore? I'm like, I still work at that bookstore, without realizing that the book industry is so much bigger than they think it is.
Yeah.
And I love humbling them a little bit. Okay. Do you have any advice for young writers who are growing up in this world today?
I'll take it first since you write the book first, and then we'll pass it to Susie. I mean, I have the same advice that I have for sort of anybody, like that passion that you just heard Susie and Haley sort of talking about how much they love that, like bring that to your writing. So first of all, like write the thing that inspires and impassions you, write in the voice that comes naturally to you. Don't try and sort of follow a trend or be somebody you're not. Like lean into who you are. That is your superpower. And then you write the thing, and all of writing is revising. So maybe you write it and leave it on your hard drive for many years and come back to it and do several different drafts, or you have a group of friends or a critique group that you do, and you rework that thing and you rework it till you've gotten it as good as you possibly can. And now comes the hard part. I always tell people in this who are talking about this that writing the submission letter, which is like the little short, talk about not being a salesperson, it's like marketing copy that you send to the agent to get them interested in reading your manuscript, is the hardest part of the whole process.
So the advice that I always give actually is that, you should read a lot. Read as much as you can, and then also write a lot and keep writing, because the more you read and the more you write, like the more you sort of perfect and hone your craft. And then at the same time, like, don't ever give up, because I really do believe that sometimes like what separates the people who get published from the people who don't are just that the people who get published just keep trying. And I mean, I represent a lot of authors. I am fortunate enough to work with authors who are big bestsellers and have had movies made, and so many of them will tell you it wasn't their first book that got published. It wasn't even their first book that got an agent. Sometimes it's like the 7th thing you write that gets an agent, and then it's the 8th book you write that actually sells to a publisher.
Didn't you just have an author that broke out like on like a really late book?
I did. It was actually her 8th
Susie?
novel. Yes, can you hear me? It was her 8th novel that was published.
Yeah.
And so she'd written a number of books, and a lot of them had come out and she'd gotten wonderful reviews, but they just didn't quite find the right audience. And she had some really passionate fans, but it was just a few of them. And finally her 8th book came out, and we were really lucky. There was a TikTok that went viral, and it was someone saying that Fourth Wing was their 2nd favorite novel of the year. And when someone had asked them what their favorite one was, they held up my author's book, and suddenly Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Oh. And suddenly it took off, but Rebecca had written many other books before that, and so now those readers who love Divine Rivals get to discover the books that she wrote before them. But I think that that sort of notion of like really just knowing that you're in for a long road. Like the publishing is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and that's okay. And
I will say that I think for people who are meant for this, like it's a bummer when you have the years that don't work out as much as you want, but you feel so incredibly lucky, and there's nothing else you want to do. Even on the days that you hate it, there's nothing else you want to do but make up stories and write them down.
Yeah, I always say like you want to, like if you want to be a writer, like hold on to that sort of like what you love about writing and reading. And because publishing is a business, right? And so like with any job, no matter if it's your dream job or not, any job is going to have those days where you're like, I hate my job. And it's okay. It's okay. Just remember like what you love about it, and you want to like write for yourself and write the stories, right, that are going to make you feel like, why not? Like this might not ever make it out there, but I love it and I love these characters, because truly at the end of the day, it's that emotion that you're putting into it and the love that goes into the writing that is what's going to resonate with readers. And to speak to Gayle's how do you like pitching an agent, basically you have to tell what your book is about and convince people to read it. So you have to be a little bit of a salesperson yourself in the beginning. And I always say the best way to think about that is if you look at some of your favorite books and you look at the what we call like the book jacket copy, which is like, you know, on the back of the paperback or on the inside flap of your hardcover.
We work very hard on this copy. It does not come easy.
But it essentially, like, that's about 200 words that answers what is this book about. And that's kind of like, as a writer, like, after you've written the book, don't worry about it beforehand, but after you've written the book and you're ready to try to like send it to an agent, that's what you want to think about, is like, how would I describe this to people and sort of answer that question, what is this book about? And you sort of want you want to kind of describe the first like third to first half of the book so that they're kind of like, oh, and then what happens? And then you stop. And then they have to read it to find out.
We all have to become salespeople at some point.
It's like the ultimate capitalism, like in a good way.
Yeah.
Okay, this is for both of you, because it's just like, who are some authors, new and experienced, who inspire you?
It's really more like anytime I read a book where, and this can be like YA or adult or anything or middle grade, where somebody does something daring that seems so impossible to me. And like, how did you do that? Mm-hmm. I'm so jealous that you could do that. That is always like the inspiration for me to just keep upping the game, right? To keep leveling up and trying something that's hard and new, and not in the vein of, it's not like I'm inspired by this and I want to do that. I'm trying to think of like a specific book where I read the book and I just like got in touch with a person. I'm like, I hate you. This is amazing. I love you. But I will come back to it. But like a lot of YA books and middle grade books have blown my mind that way. And I'm completely blanking. I'm thinking like when I first read a Jandy Nelson book, I was just like,
oh my God.
This is like, you know, this is not what I expect this book to be. Melina Marchetta, I love her books. Like when I read those books, I'm just like, I have no idea how you did this. So
Gayle, this is why we vibe so well together, is because I love both those authors you mentioned. When I read Melina Marchetta's Jellicoe Road, it's another one where like there's lots of different pieces, and in the beginning you're a little bit like, I don't know what's happening, and then it comes together in a way that you're just like, oh, my mind is blown.
She's such an amazing writer.
I love a good twist, and it's funny, I saw a TikTok the other day where a reader was talking and she was like, I don't want your recommendation if you're the kind of reader who's like, but the plot holes. And I am definitely someone who sees plot holes. But
my occupational hazard.
My favorite books, right, are the ones that I get so invested that either I don't see the plot holes or I don't care that there's a plot hole. Like and you know, from my perspective, it's I'll fix that later, but like, let me just keep reading it.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky enough to work on projects where I'll be reading it and I'll be reading and then I'm like, oh no, I'm supposed to be editing this, and I'll have to like go back 20 pages and be like, where did I leave off? Because I just get so invested in it. And I think that's really lucky. But I had a book come out last year, 2 years ago, called The Probability of Everything, which is by Sarah Everett, and it has a twist like at the middle, like last third of the book, that she had told me, right? She had told me before I read it that the twist was coming and what it was, and I still, it was like I had gotten so invested that I forgot what she'd told me, and it happened, and I still, you know, had the moments where that I was like trying to wipe my eyes while I was reading, which obviously then you can also see I'm a sucker for, you know, I love books that are going to make me cry, but that also, like, I'm still going to feel hopeful. Mm-hmm. And like, maybe they're also like a little bit funny and I'm going to laugh. Like, I really want that sort of full experience.
So truly, like when you said Jandy Nelson, she is an OG. When I'll Give You the Sun came out, I was also a teenager, and that was like one of Haley's literary canon books. So like that was one of the books that like changed my life, and I've been like constantly searching for that same high. And I feel like a newer person in the rink right now is Tracy Dion, in the sense that like she gives me the same vibe of like I'm eating this up, I can't stop reading, it's evoking like the same emotions. Just because Legendborn is, it's not in the same genre, but there was just like something about Legendborn that like kept me hooked, and it is so fantastic. And
The tingle that you get when you get like that in your hands and you start reading and you're like, oh, this is going to be one of those. You have to savor it, and you like climb into bed at night and you're so excited because like, I'm back with my book.
That's what I've been like loving about the snow lately, because I've been like snowed in the past couple of days, and I can just like truly just sit down and like read a book. I can cozy up with like my little blanket, and I'm like looking for that ooh factor of like the books I'm reading right now, and I'm like, this is the ultimate peak cozy. Okay. What is your writing process like? Do you listen to music? Does it have to be silent?
Yeah, it's different for different books. I think like if I Stay, when I wrote that, I would listen to the same song before I wrote every single time. It was the song Falling Slowly from Once. I would listen to it, it would make me cry, and then I would sit down and I would start to write. I listened to other things too, but like that was just like this weird ritual I had with that. With Where She Went, I remember I wrote that entire thing in silence until Adam starts like finding music again, and then I just started listening to music. It was crazy. For just one day, Rollin' in the Deep was playing over and over again. So like every book has their own one, and I think for Afterlife, I was listening to sort of a lot of like more like chamber orchestral kind of like no lyric type thing. So bands like Moom or whoever else, all the Icelandic Sigur Rós and things in that vein.
I love that. There's someone I know who like listens to music with lyrics as they read, and I can't listen to any music while I read, because then I'm trying to like listen to the music and sing along while like reading the pages, like the words on the page, and it has to be silent for me.
You can't read two books at once. Yeah.
No, it's got to be one and dead silent. Oh, this question is for Susie. What books have you worked on, and what has been your favorite part about being a literary agent?
Susie does not have time to say all the books that she's worked on. She's worked on so many mega best-selling books.
You can't actually see the titles, but they're all the ones behind me. But some of my best-known projects, Victoria Aveyard's Red Queen, obviously Rebecca Ross' Divine Rivals. I work with Cassandra Clare and her book Swordcatcher that came out last year. I definitely, I work with a lot of authors who write, I basically just stick to novels. I like nonfiction too, but I'm really into the novels. I also always describe myself as a 16-year-old girl at heart. So like, I'm all about romanticism. Like I love relationships. I love, at least a hopeful ending. And so I guess those are probably like my tent poles. What was the second half of that question?
And what is your favorite thing about being a literary agent?
I mean, so something probably, Haley, that speaks to you was when I first got into this, I went to a convention. I was still like an intern or an assistant, and I went to a book convention, and I remember walking the floor, and publishers were just handing out free advanced reader copies, and I was like, you're just giving me this? Are you just giving me this book that doesn't come out for 6 months? And that's still, it's a post-COVID, it's a lot less of a thing, but it's still one of my favorite things about it is like I'll go to lunch with an editor or I'll meet with someone and they'll be like, oh, I'm so excited for this book coming out in a few months. Here's an early copy. And that is still one of my favorite things about it is the amount of books that I have downstairs that I've just gotten. It's wonderful. I love it so much. But truly my favorite part about it is, working with authors. There's of course that wonderful moment where working with a debut author who's never been published before, where I get to call them and be like, guess what, we have an offer on your book. And that is, such a wonderful, like, sparkly feeling. But I also think that, working with authors from, like, their first book to books all the way down the line, working on, 8, 10, 20 books together, and being able to see, like, how those books, like, have similar themes, or how they change, or how they reflect what the author's going through at the time, and how that sort of, like, all builds together for a career. It's, to me, it's fun, it's rewarding. Sometimes publishing certainly has its moments that I'm like, ugh, no, why did this happen? What do you mean the books fell off a boat and went into the sea, and now we're going to miss our pub date, which did happen to me once. But anyway, but there are so many, like, wonderful moments that that just make it feel really amazing. And actually, another thing is that, which is not something I thought about until recently-ish, but is that, books are actually one of the only forms of, like, storytelling that teach people empathy. You can watch a movie and you can watch TV, but it's not the same experience as, like, reading from a different person's point of view and feeling what's happening to them. And so I think that, anytime that I'm looking around the world kind of feeling, like, disheartened, or feeling like there's people out there that, like, I don't understand them and they don't understand me, I think that I kind of always come back to the fact that, like, sure, like, this is just books, but I think that books are really important and they're really valuable, and that the ability to teach people empathy is something that is just so vital. And so I think that that's something that I've, like, definitely held on to lately.
Yeah.
Can we get Susie her own speaker series?
No, oh my God, no.
Comments, like, let us know if you want Susie to run a speaker series. But this is, like, some wisdom you're dropping today.
It's TED Talk.
Yeah, seriously.
Okay, one more for Susie. How would an aspiring author get a literary agent?
Yes. So basically, obviously the first thing you have to do is you have to write a book. You have to read it, edit it, have some friends read it, and
all
edit
the things
it
we
too.
talked about so far.
Yep.
And then you write the editorial letter. Yeah.
And then, once you're like, this book is as perfect as I think I can make it. I think that a great resource, there's a website called querytracker.net. And it's basically like Yelp for literary agents. It's like a database where you can say, like, I've written a young adult novel. Who represents young adult books? Or fantasy, or whatever. You can put your genre, your age group, everything like that in, and you can get a list of agents. You can look through them. You can even see comments that other people have written about either working with them or like hearing back from them. And then you write a query, which is what I was talking about, is that it's about 200-ish words or so that to answer the question, like, what is your book about? Every agent, frustratingly, probably has, like, slightly different guidelines, but for instance, I always say, like, I want people to send me their query and then their first, like, 5 pages of the book. And you sort of put that together, you proofread everything, you see how it sounds.
You make sure you write the right agent's name when you send the letter or the email.
Yes, my favorite is getting my name spelled incorrectly, even though you have to spell my name correctly in my email address. It's just always, like, a little bit of a funny detail. But you send those off, and then you kind of settle in to wait and hear back. And I would say that, I always tell writers that if you hear back and you get, like, 75% of the agents that you've sent it off to are like, yes, I want to read your book. That means you have a really great query and you don't make any changes. It's good. If 75% of the agents are like, no, sorry, it's not for me, that probably means your query might need some work and like you should revise it and try again, because I get about 200 queries a week. So if you write a query and send it to me and I don't request your book, and then in a month later you send me a revised query, I'm not going to remember the first time around. So it's like totally fine. But at the same time, like while you're settling in for that wait to hear back, you should also just write something else. Like kind of like what I was saying about like you just want to keep trying, like write another book, write something that's either similar, write something that's totally different, write whatever like your heart is sort of in, and keep writing something else. And, eventually you'll find that right match.
That is so smart. And there are so many authors who seem like they have so many books that come out so quickly. Like I think Jason Reynolds, I think like maybe with Rainbow Rowell, I'm not sure, but like it's because, maybe not Rainbow, but it's because they were querying so long and meanwhile they were writing all these books. And then like I think in Jason's case, like they started to sort of come out like 2 a year because he had such a huge inventory and they were all incredible.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then one last question before we let you go for the night. I know it's so sad. What are you both working on now, and what can you tell us about like your next projects?
I can't say anything about the next project. There's lots of news coming, I hope, in the coming year or so, but like I can't say anything other than I'm working on new projects. And one of them is completely brand new and not something that has been marinating for 7 years that I'm having a fun little experience with.
A little dally. Yeah. Susie, what are you working on right now?
What am
400 books?
Yeah. I know. Well, no, so today was my first day back to work after the holiday. And so I feel like all day I was doing a lot of emails, a lot of catch up on things. But publishing is so interesting because like so much of what I spend my time on, like sometimes there's like the promotional stuff for a book coming out, but a lot of what I'm spending a lot of my time on is like books that are like gonna come out in 2026 because it's so early in the development process. So I always feel like my internal clock is a little bit off. But I have an author who is writing I wouldn't say it's a romantasy, it's like sort of like adjacent to that. It's a fantasy with romantic elements. Yeah. But definitely like it leans harder into the fantasy and like magic and like a political world and everything.
It's a fantanance.
Yes. And we're preparing to go on submission with that next week. So we had a call this morning and I did our last round of sort of like polish it up edits. And we're planning to submit that to editors on Thursday.
Wow.
Oh, that's so exciting. I always love hearing about like the beginning bits where like we're getting teased on like new books coming out, and I'm just like, hee.
I mean, it's not all this. There's a lot of other things, but I don't think there's any other job where you get to feel like a fairy godmother quite as much as a literary agent.
Susie just walks around. She has her little crown of like cat ear headphones, like a little wand. Okay, so we have like a couple of minutes left, and in honor of Marjorie being the song for Afterlife, we're going to play it. We're going to hold space. It is our own Eras tour as I do our little outro. We're going to all sob together. But like I said, Gayle is having a little giveaway. So if you buy book from us, from the novelneighbor.com, the first 5 people who oh my god, I can't do this. I'm like, it's the same thing. I'm like reading and listening. Oh no.
Here, I'll play the music. I got the music covered.
First 5 people who order books from the Novel Neighbor, you'll get like a fun little swag bag from us and a personalized note from me personally being like, thank you. Can't wait to sob.
Be so kind.
Let's go. We're gonna cry in the club.
We were gonna do this as a sing-along in real life, and we are rescheduling the in-person, so stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned.
We will sing together.
We'll be together one day. Keep your eye on. Thank you so much to the St. Louis County Library for partnering with this. Thank you, Susie, for coming and joining our weird little virtual panel as we're all snowed in. And thank you so much, Gayle, for writing another banger. And then we're finishing out the hour, crying and sobbing.
I don't have my phone.
Going out.
I think I don't. Oh, where is it?
All right, and thank you all so much for coming tonight. Hopefully, we'll see you in person very, very soon. Have a good rest of your night, St. Louis.
Bye.